A four-step startup plan from South Park's Eric Cartman reads, start up, cash in, sell out, bro down. If only it was that easy. Unfortunately, there are many entrepreneurs out there that expect it to be. Today, we're talking about the right mindset entrepreneurs and innovators need to be successful and to solve the greatest problems in the world. My guest is Alex Raymond. He is the CEO of CAPTA and the host of the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit, which is coming up June 4th in Boulder, Colorado. I cannot wait for this conversation. But first, welcome to this week's episode of Make Sense, a video podcast that simplifies complex issues at the intersection of tech and people. There are many. So whether you're totally hyped on artificial intelligence and ready for the robot takeover, or you want to crawl into a cave after deleting all your social media accounts, I don't blame you. I'm here with my guests to help make sense of what's going on so you can design yourself into the future. My name is Lindsay Tabas, the Lady Engineer. I'm a pragmatic futurist and human-first technologist, serial entrepreneur, and innovation consultant. If you're new here, subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Let's make sense of the conscious entrepreneur mindset. Alex, welcome. How are you?
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Lindsay. Great to be here. And by the way, South Park, Colorado, I appreciate the Cartman reference. South Park, Colorado is only about 2 hours from here.
Yeah, I was wondering. I was like, I was going to ask you before we hit record how you felt about South Park, but I'm glad I didn't because I like an honest, raw reaction. Do you know the image or the episode I'm talking about where Cartman is like, here's our 4-step plan to startup success?
I don't know it, but it certainly sounds very on brand.
Yeah, I use it in my product market fit talk. A lot of the times people talk about product market fit as an inflection point. And I'm like, if only it was this easy. So let's start with our first segment, Crystal Ball. What does the future hold? So this is where I call out interesting predictions for this year. And my guests tell us their hot take. So I'm going to fire off some predictions. And Alex, I want you to say like, yes, I want that to happen, or no, please no. And if there's any like background or tidbit, you go for it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You gave me the impression that you'd be open to commenting on some of the wilder predictions out there.
Let's
see. Thank you for being willing to have fun here. On the first episode of 2024, episode 41, I pitched a bunch of Elon Musk's predictions that never came true. So this one we know did not come true, but I want to know what you think. So this is one of them. Neuralink will be in human skulls by 2020. Are you familiar with Neuralink?
Somewhat.
Okay, so it's a startup developing chips that connect brains to computers. The chip has not yet been put in human brains, but have been put into small monkeys. The first objective is to restore the mobility of paraplegics, which I think is cool. How open are you to putting a computer chip in your brain?
I think that they actually did get one in recently, wasn't there?
Okay.
I believe that there was a story about someone who is paralyzed or unable to use his hands. And the thing that I saw was him successfully playing chess on a computer simply with I believe it was eye movement. So
Okay.
I'm like 90% sure. We can check that actually was Neuralink, but I'm pretty sure that it was.
Mm-hmm. The technology, though, to track eye movements has existed, like from video camera, has existed for 20 years.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of, my brain, the sanctity of my brain, I'm not opposed. I'm not opposed if there were some clear benefits and good reasons to do so. Like, for example, I'm a man of a certain age. I'm in my late 40s. Maybe I find myself needing some kind of cognitive boost in the future or access to memories that I'm no longer able to find. And this could be something that helped me out, kind of like a organic storage drive or something like that in my head. Then yeah, sure.
Well, do you trust these companies to fix bugs and release important updates in a timely manner?
I generally trust companies to look after their own self-interest. And so in the most part, for the most part, that means that they are fixing things when enough people complain about them. They may not be proactively making your life better, and they do certainly look after themselves first. But generally speaking, I would hope so. But I get the point that planned obsolescence in a brain chip would be a significant downside and probably a reason not to do it if we knew that it was, V0 or V1 and it would be hard to replace or difficult to get an upgrade.
Yeah, I've been asking this question. I think it's cute, right? Like, do you trust Elon Musk to update your firmware? And like, makes people laugh and they're like, "Ugh, I don't know about it." But our culture, society had, at one point the pacemaker, in the heart was like a new concept, and people got through it. The cochlear implant to help deaf people hear, that goes into your brain, people like took that leap. So
Yeah.
I do think the leap of faith is coming. And I did have a doctor on a few weeks ago who said this has been in the works for well over 20 years. Like, we might see it in another 5 to 10.
Cool. Yeah. I'm same with like LASIK or like lots of stuff that, people were at the beginning were like, "Ugh," and now they're totally for.
Well, you have glasses, so have you considered LASIK?
Uh, I have glasses and I have not particularly considered LASIK. Yeah.
Okay. I have glasses, obviously. And my only thought on LASIK is like, I don't know that I could keep my eyes pointed straight for this time that a laser beam is in my eye. That I have fear about. So let's move on to the next one. Immortality as a service. So humans have fantasized about extreme lifespans for millennia, but the age-old pursuit is now attracting fresh interest from VCs and tech. What do you know? Anything?
I do know that there's a lot going on in the biohacking space. I know that there's a lot going on in longevity. I know that the person who's most notorious for this at the moment is Brian Johnson, right? Used to be the founder of Braintree, made a gajillion dollars when he sold Braintree. Now he created this thing called Blueprint, and he's been spending, I believe, upwards of $2 million a year simply on the project of like optimizing his whole body. And the cool thing about what he's doing is he's, first of all, he measures absolutely everything. So that's really neat. And his process or his method is actually based on organ optimization. So he's looking at this saying, what do I need to do for my lungs, my heart, my liver, my spleen, my whatever it is, and getting all the data, and they're testing all this stuff. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff that's coming out of it. It's extremely controversial because his approach also includes like blood and plasma transfers between him and his son and his father. And so there's a lot of stuff that people are definitely not super open about these days, but it's happening. It's out there. So, I'm certainly pro like reducing the speed of aging. I'm pro health span. I'm pro lifespan. I think the death part is part of what gives life meaning. So I'm not sure that I'm pro immortality, but generally speaking, I'm pro improvement of our species.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't know that a lot of people think about what quality of life is like after 90, 100, 110, right? When they say, "Oh, I want to live forever."
Especially if you're retiring at age 65.
Right. So I don't know. What's the longest any of your family members have lived?
I don't know that I have any centenarians. Is that what it's called? I'm not sure I have any centenarians in my family. We've got some batting in the 90s though.
Yeah, I have 91, 93, and 98. And so, but like at a certain point, none of your friends are around anymore. So immortality, I think, would only be fun if like your friends were also immortal.
Well, on that point, there's the really famous Harvard happiness study, which showed that the primary indicator of happiness in your 80s was how socially active and how committed you are to your relationships in your 50s. So not even then.
Interesting. Big
Yes.
takeaway. Okay.
Big takeaway. Start now is the
I'm
takeaway.
marking this clip. Yeah, lucky. Okay, awesome. All right, last one, and this is just kind of funny. One stupidly simple app will go from 0 to 100 million users this year.
I don't have the idea myself, but you remember when Yo came out? So Yo was a thing.
I don't
know if
even
you
know
remember.
what was Yo.
Yo was an app whose entire feature set involved sending the word yo to one another.
Okay.
And it's a real thing. It actually happened. They actually raised money. I don't know that it turned into a business in the end, but it was a thing.
Okay.
Check it out.
I'm
Yep.
thinking like Clubhouse in 2021, 2020, 2021, and now I have no idea where it is.
No, indeed. Clubhouse was going to eat the world and then didn't.
And then didn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
My wife and I have started playing Wordle recently, and I must say that's a very cool little app. It's owned
Yeah.
by the New York Times, but I like it. And I also realized that I was super late to the party on Wordle, but we're having a good time with it.
Yeah. I was in Wordle and then out of Wordle, but anyway, I subscribed to New York Times for their crossword.
Today we got Wordle in 2. I guess I could even say
That's
what it is on the air because it's not gonna air on the right
yeah, but
day.
what about me? Like, what if I want to go do Wordle later? So, all right. To queue up the next 2 segments, I have a little missive. Make Sense is my call for changing how we innovate in business, whether in large-scale enterprise systems or lean tech startups. We must adopt a fresh perspective to tackle major challenges, and the failure statistics that we hear all the time at the root cause are due to ego and fear-driven thinking. So to address this, we need one, space to talk about our inner lives so that we can identify and treat and take action on ego and fear issues. And we also just need practical tools and strategies to implement to make us better innovators. So today with Alex, we're talking about both. Yeah. So in our first segment, who needs a safety net? In this segment, my guests and I share the risks, failures, learning lessons of entrepreneurship and the chutzpah needed to create their own path. So, Alex, as the founder of the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit, can you make sense for us simply what's your definition of conscious leadership?
Yeah, the idea here behind the event, which I'll get to in a second, is based on a lot of stuff that I learned from conscious leadership. And there's in particular there's this really well-known book called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, written by Jim Dethmer, Diana Chapman, and Kaylee Klemp. And from within there, what it's got all these just really really tremendous ways of thinking and operating. And it starts with taking responsibility for 100% of your life, or taking 100% responsibility for all areas of your life. And the point of taking responsibility for your life is understanding that no one's coming to the rescue. We all have this idea, especially highly optimistic entrepreneurs, that if I get into a pickle, somehow someone's going to show up and solve something for me. And very important is to realize that is not the case.
Good. I know I froze, but you can talk through that. Are you frozen now
the way
too?
that relates to what we're doing at Conscious Entrepreneur is Conscious Entrepreneur is separate from Conscious Leadership. You said Conscious Leadership at the beginning, which is why I sort of picked up that one and went with it. Conscious Entrepreneur is different. Similar themes, similar ideas. We both use the C word. And the idea is, how do I set myself up for success to navigate through the inevitable ups and downs of being an entrepreneur? First-time entrepreneurs especially don't fully appreciate the amount of work or the commitment or the reality of what it means to be an entrepreneur, whereas those who are more seasoned typically do and are willing to set themselves up for success and really strap in and get ready, so to speak. And so the whole idea behind this gathering is that we can get together, we can support one another, we can be in a place to have open conversations, we can get in a place to really say, hey, here's what's happening for me, or here's the struggles that I've been having, and to come together to find solutions. So we'll have I don't know, 250, 300 people up in Boulder in about a month. And this is a 2-day thing with tremendous speakers. So we've got well-known people like Ryan Holiday, who's the Stoic, author of a lot of those books on Stoicism and Stoic philosophy. Sherelle Dorsey, who's an incredible media entrepreneur and host of the TED Tech podcast, and then a whole variety of really well-known CEOs and entrepreneurs who are going to be up there telling the reverse side of their hero story. So not the thing that everyone knows about. They're going to be telling you what actually happened, what was it really like. And so, the cool thing is it's people who you're going to be inspired by, and you think, wow, this person, they got so far, they did so much stuff, but what was it really like? What really happened as they were going through building their business? So super fun exploration, and really rewarding to put that together every year. This is year 3 for us.
Oh, congratulations. So, could you give us the TLDR on how you came to say, like, this is my thing now?
I've been an entrepreneur for years. Right now, I run a software company called Capta. That's Kapta. It's a software company in the account management space. And before that, I did other companies as well. So I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. And I often would find myself just kind of stuck in these repeating mental loops, right? The mental loops of like, I'm never going to figure this out, or this is just too hard, or I don't have what it takes, or I can't crack this nut or solve this problem, or what have you. And so I found myself just like constantly spinning through the same stories over and over and over again. And when I went to sort of see what was out there that might be able to help me, or things that I could plug into, I didn't really quite find what I was looking for. I found entrepreneur groups. I did, retreats and meditations and all this stuff. I did a men's group, and nothing was quite aligned with the idea of like, as an entrepreneur, how do you get through this? And so sensing that, I essentially created the community that I wish I had 10 years ago.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I often tell others that entrepreneurship is the quickest path to self-discovery, because you have to continually identify your fears and tackle them in order to grow. What's your relationship to fear?
So first of all, I do agree, and some of the people who have been to some of our speakers at Conscious Entrepreneurs say something very similar to what you just said, which is that the entirety of the entrepreneurial existence basically is spiritual development. It is personal development. It's a spiritual journey that you're on. So, for example, that's what Gay Hendricks says. He's the person behind Zone of Genius. That's what Sri Kumar Rao says as well. And so these are like tremendous thinkers. And what I think is interesting about that is to consider that the entire work of building a company or building an organization is me working on myself. And it's me working on myself through the vehicle of being an entrepreneur and through the vehicle of building a company. And what inevitably happens is I'll get stuck in an old mental model. So one of the most common, of course, is fear, like you're saying. So the mental model of fear is, I can't figure this out. I'm not good enough. The challenges are too great for me. It's just little old me against the world, this sort of thing. And so fear is going to be driven by scarcity. Fear is going to be driven by for a lot of people, these are very old patterns and thoughts. So this is not new. This is not the adult you talking. This is the 6-year-old or 12-year-old or 4-year-old, whatever it is.
A little child feeling
the little child, fearing this, because as an adult, no doubt you have recovered from mistakes. No doubt you have overcome obstacles. No doubt you have figured things out along the way. But we still have this story that says, especially at the super ego, I'm not good enough. I can't figure this out. So yeah, that happens all the time. And there's there's two things that happen. Number one is I do nothing, I don't recognize it, and I wind up losing an entire weekend or multiple days of like just overthinking and working myself into a twist, which happens a lot.
It comes out as self-sabotage, right?
It comes out as self-sabotage. The other is I recognize it, I make some attempt to intercept it, and intercept usually just means, does this actually withstand scrutiny? So whatever silly story I'm making up for myself, is this actually true? Or is this something just I'm so used to thinking it's like an automatic thought?
Yeah.
And so when they come up, and so my advice, my encouragement to the listeners is, when fear-based thoughts come up, ask yourself, is this true? Do we really know that this is true? Is there anything out there that might disprove it? And lo and behold, you're going to find lots and lots of things to disprove.
Yeah. Do you have any examples, any small instances where you were like, wow, I was holding back in fear because I thought X, and like it's actually quite silly?
For me, a lot of it comes around to this sort of very old part of me that says, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. And so the way that manifests in sort of getting the word out or expressing myself, if you will, because the the old thought is, oh, I have nothing interesting to say, people aren't going to care, et cetera. And so I do find myself like sort of holding back sometimes. Maybe I'm not going to do this, maybe I'm not going to say this or post this or whatever it is. And so what's really nice is when I realize, okay, this is old program, I can get through this, I do get through it, and then I give positive feedback. So for example, I ran an event several weeks ago here in Boulder, and it was for our customers. And I've done this before, so I wasn't so much worried about like being on stage or anything like that. It was more like getting this one particular message across. And afterwards, someone came up to me, and I really appreciated it. He said he liked the talk, which is great. But then he said, I could see the through line that you put throughout the entire thing. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, great. All right. Felt good. So that felt awesome.
Yeah. I'll tell you, because I think one of the things I like that you said about your summit, and I've always said on this podcast, but also in the 20 years I've been in this industry, is like, we don't talk about failure enough. And I know that we're not talking about failure enough, or people aren't sharing their actual failures because there aren't any tears. So I'm like, I need more crying to be convinced that this was indeed a catastrophic failure for you. But I will say for me, even recently with the growth of this podcast, you and I were connected on LinkedIn before I reached out to you. I don't remember why. I liked what you were doing. I was like, this guy doesn't know me from Eve, but I'm going to like shoot him a message. Now, in the startup world, we talk about like cold outreach and just going for it all the time. But I noticed that I was like holding back in fear a little bit because like, am I good enough? Right. Am I just, what I say? I'm just a plebeian. They'll be donating their time to me. Like they think this is charity or community service because they feel bad. Right. My friends laugh when I tell them that because they're like, you're so confident, you put yourself out there. But those things do go through our heads. I like to say that fear-based mentality, that 6-year-old, it's like a compulsive thought that we're probably always going to think. It's how quickly you have the second thought that says, no, this is not a thing, right?
Right.
So it's how quickly you can have that second thought and get over it, right?
Yeah, for sure. The automatic stuff is just going to happen, and it's going to bombard you. And the skill is understanding what to pick up and what to let go. And by far, most of these things are just time to let go. The best tool for this, by the way, is developing a meditation practice. So 100%. You do a meditation practice, you start to learn not to believe everything you think, not to trust everything that's in your head, and to get a little bit more space between whatever gets fired off and how we react to it.
Yeah. So per the podcast intro, I mentioned, South Park's Eric Cartman's 4-step startup plan, and the media tends to glorify tech CEOs as heroes. And I think the broader startup community does the same, spending more time talking about success than failure. How do you think this affects, new founders when they inevitably hit their first roadblock or first failure?
There's a lot of differing opinions on startup failure. There are the people who say, well, there's no such thing as failure because I'm just learning this for something else. And then there are other people who say I would never invest in a founder who failed because, it shows they were wrong the first time and they would, they couldn't execute or whatever it is. And so, I think that the lens to look at this through is very broad, meaning if you really widen the aperture on your thinking about what it means to be an entrepreneur at the end of the day, at least for me, is an identity, right? So it's an identity. A failure is a point in time. A failure is a series of decisions I made that turned out to be incorrect, or things that I thought were going to happen that didn't happen. The broader failure is not doing, not trying, not putting your heart into it, not learning. So I think that's really important. Is people will kind of get consumed with this idea of like, oh, I tried something and it didn't work, or we didn't get the signups, or we didn't launch the product, or we didn't get the customers, or any of the number of things that can go wrong. And there's like an almost infinite number of things that can go wrong in a startup versus, okay, this happens, so what?
Mm-hmm.
One way that Jerry Colonna puts it is, he says, this being so, so what?
Mm-hmm.
And if I can start to accept the reality that's in front of me, then I can deploy my resource to figure out what am I going to go do about it. If I don't accept the reality that's in front of me because ego, or I'm lacking information, or I don't want to change my mind, or I'm being too rigid, then I can't make the necessary steps to change. So
Right.
acceptance of reality, which by the way is also at the heart of being a conscious entrepreneur, acceptance of reality winds up really helping you to steer your decision making.
It reminds me of a quote that my uncle always said. It's like a first line of a book called Road Less Traveled, where the guy says, life is difficult. Once you figure out that life is difficult, it all of a sudden becomes easy, right? And it is about accepting that there's no external conditions that will save you. There's no external, like, you can blame external conditions if you'd like, but you still have to take your own action. Like, you have to take ownership of that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a big deal. So a lot of people, especially in the mindfulness space, they say, well, you just have to accept the world as it is, and you have to, surrender, for example. And one of the giant misconceptions is surrender means being a doormat, or
Mhm.
surrender means not taking action, and that's not true. So what it means is, sort of like uh, being in the crucible, right? So the main thing here is understand what is happening, accept that something is happening, and then go take the action that is appropriate to fix or solve or improve or whatever it is the problem.
Mhm.
As opposed to just thinking, well, hey, I'm in a surrender mentality, so I'm literally just going to let the world walk all over me, or I'm never going to get out of bed or off the couch.
Right. Right. It's the serenity prayer, for people that know it, is telling the difference between like what you can and cannot control and taking action on the stuff that you can control. Uh, so fear is an innate human emotion. We mentioned earlier, like those thoughts just aren't going to go away. And it's just how quickly you have that second thought. This is so what? It's a huge thorn, though, in the side of creativity and innovation. How do you see kind of fear, like the symptoms of fear? Like how do people realize they're taking fear-based action, or it's affecting their creativity and innovation? Like, how do we take action on that?
It is so hard to be creative or valuable when you're living in fear. And
Hmm.
so for me, and also for many others, when fear shows up, I essentially do nothing. Like I go into freeze mode.
Hmm.
Some people fight, some people flight. I go into freeze mode when I experience that. And you can't create anything. You can't have any deep thoughts. You also can't be generous, right? So these are all things that you want to be as an entrepreneur. You want to be generous and creative and innovative. And if I'm stuck in fear, then I simply can't do those things, and I don't take the steps forward that I need to, and I don't have the result that I'm looking for, etc. And so that's how it manifests for me, right? And like,
Yeah.
no, I'm not going to do this, or I just like totally freeze up and I walk away from my inbox not to look at it.
Yeah.
So uh, those are the freeze mechanisms that happen. And how do you overcome this? Well, a lot of it has to do with the fact that when we're fearing, especially in the 21st century, we're fearing in our heads. We're not fearing in our bodies. Like there's no physical threat to us. And so when I do that, you know, I'm very lucky that I live in a beautiful place, Boulder, Colorado. It's very easy for me to get outside in the sunshine. We have 300 days of sunshine a year. And what this affords me is access to fresh air and blue sky, and is a great way to get out of my head. So
Hmm.
fear also manifests for a lot of people in being stuck in their head. They're stuck up here, and they're not feeling.
Hmm.
And once I can remind myself, hey, I'm safe, I'm okay, I'm whole, everything is working, then the mind will then follow the body in cooling off a little bit, which then opens us back up to innovation and creativity and being generous.
So I had a therapist give me a technique back in 2016, 17 that I'd love to share about fear. So you know how when an animal is scared and they arch their back and they go up on their toes? Humans, we like do the same thing, right? We tense up and often we go up on our toes and our I don't know the technical like brain terms, but you know, our that part of our brain that's softer and creative and can really think through things, system two, I think some psychiatrists or psychologists call it, it gets cut off, right? Like we're only acting from our brainstem. So you can physically get your like open up your brain if you first put your heels on the ground and spend a minute focused on feeling your heels on the ground, because your heels on the ground triggers and signals to your body that you are not scared,
That's
you are
cool.
not ready to fly, like take flight or run.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, you identify something like you identify 5 colors. Because if your brain can take the time to identify specific colors, uh, and then like for like fabrics or surfaces, different feelings, 3 sounds, you know, 2 smells, whatever it is, like, and then like your favorite taste, you like open up, you physically open up all of your senses, and it allows like the rest of your brain to start participating.
That's cool. That's a great
Yeah.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
think it's super helpful.
yeah. It's like noticing the body, reminding yourself that you're in a body.
Well, it's also like with meditation, you know, a lot of guides start with like feel your body on the ground, feel the
Mm-hmm.
ground support you. So,
Mm-hmm.
very cool. Okay, so let's move on to our third segment. No scrubs, just solutions. In this segment, we dive into strategies and techniques to elevate problem-solving skills and leave mediocre solutions behind. So, how do we bring in the learnings? Like you're on the third year of Conscious Entrepreneur Summit. Like, how do we bring conscious entrepreneur learnings into our everyday operations? I mean, I gave one with the heels, you gave one with getting outside, but how does that show up in like systems and culture and all that other stuff within a company?
The way that I think about this is that there are 4 layers or 4 ripples around bringing this into the world, and it starts with what I call the conscious you. The conscious you is the commitment that you are making to improving yourself. Now, who's the primary beneficiary? You are. And great. It's a super thing to do, because if you change your inner workings, then lo and behold, you'll find lots of things get better in your life. So I was thinking about it starting there. It starts at the conscious you. We then go to uh, team around me. So team is basically who's closest to me. And so by changing myself, what have I manifested out there? So it could be family, partner, spouse, or immediate team, you know, type of thing. So the people with whom I'm interacting quite a lot. And it's a manifesting move, because it manifested based on who have I become by committing to myself. We then get to how do I implement this in a company? And that's the third level. That's the third layer of the circle. So how do I implement within a conscious company what needs to happen for culture, what needs to happen for behaviors and norms, and so on. And then finally, how do I get out there and inspire the world, which is much bigger. So we go conscious you, conscious team, conscious company, conscious world. That's how I see that coming about. A lot of people make the mistake of saying, well, hey, I'm doing something already in ESG, DEI, social impact, whatever. So that's in the world. So I don't need to do the rest of this. And we all know now that that's not really the case. And so how do we start? Which is what your question was. How do we start doing this? It starts by committing to yourself that you are going to practice radical self-inquiry, meaning I'm really going to do it. I'm really going to figure out, what am I made of? What am I made up of? As you do that, you'll notice you change, your attitude changes, your perceptions change, your friends change, how people react to you changes, generally for the good, but not always. But you know, it's a result of being committed to making that. So if I do that myself, then I can model for others. If we then agree that this is a great thing for us to do, we can create a culture around that, or we can agree to certain norms around it. And so those are the steps that wind up being most successful for people. You can't really mandate this. You have to live it. You have to be it before you can expect anyone else to follow you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I like step 2, who you surround yourself with. If I'm connecting some dots, it's like, if when the conscious you can realize that maybe you are not, as a leader, confronting your CTO for being a butthead because you're like scared of losing him. You might not be able to find someone else, but like you realize he's toxic or something to the organization. First you recognize that the fear is in you. Then you remember that you are in charge and leading this organization. And then you figure out a comfortable way to start having those conversations to correct the behavior, and they'll show you who they are. And if they don't change, then we find better people on our team and in our organization that want to improve and create a healthier workplace. So that's one connection. And the other, I like, just in reference to our own individual self, because not everyone listening is an entrepreneur or has like a large organization, is that the sociology term homophily, birds of a feather flock together, is that you can start to be more conscious about who you want to spend your time with, because you are the result of like the 5 people you spend the most time with. So it happens organically as you work on yourself, but you can also do it very purposefully as well if you want to just elevate.
And doing it in a community is great, right? So this is why Conscious Entrepreneur is a community, and you've got peer forums and stuff like that popping up all over the place. It's because we all prefer to do this together in a tribe.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And it seems like you have to go through 1 and 2 before you can, like 3 culture norms. You could say unlimited vacation days or build a meditation room, but if you never see the CEO using the meditation room, or you never have like managers know that it's okay for someone to go into the meditation room, then like it really is just a band-aid and not a solution to a root cause.
Yeah, exactly.
So work hours, we like move really, really fast, and our left brain, analytical thinking takes over. There's a lot of pressure in the work environment to like have all the right answers. Going back to the fear, I think the fear-based mentality keeps us from experimenting in a way that like the lean startup or agile really, evangelizes. So we need to slow down in the creative process to bring the right brain in that. Do you see opportunities? Have you been able to figure out in your own company how to give the creative teams time to slow down in the process of like product development and solution finding?
I mean, deep work is a big deal, and spending time on the research part of R&D is also a big deal. And so the way that I do this when I need to find inspiration or an answer is to go and ask questions and be curious about the world. And so curiosity allows us to be much more right-brained, because we're linking together different ideas, we're empathizing, so we're trying to get to the heart of the matter by understanding where a person is coming from, as opposed to being like boom, 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 left brain. And so those are really great. Those are really great tricks. Anytime, I always remember this adage that the answers are not inside the building, which I got from Steve Blank in the 4 Steps to the Epiphany book. And this is all about us saying, hey, if I'm building a product, if I'm doing something, I have to go be curious and solve something that's an actual need, not something that I just dreamt up and think might be a good idea.
Yeah. I think I have Steve Blank's The Startup Manual, which I highly recommend. It's like a textbook. Mm-hmm. It literally is a hardback textbook. But I think other people call it Goob, get out of the building.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Don't do the research. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes in the startup world particularly, but even in Fortune 500, there's so much pressure to move like really fast. Like the deadline was yesterday kind of thing. And that doesn't leave people time to bring the right brain in. And the right brain, as you said, it supports emotional and social processes like empathy. We need empathy to solve problems for other people because we need other people to buy our products, right? So, do you see like if besides doing, research up front, are there other places in, I don't know, the company lifestyle to open, or life cycle, not lifestyle, life cycle to encourage more kind of creativity and curiosity? Or like, how do we break the pressure of like, this was supposed to be done yesterday?
Well, a lot of that is totally made up, right? These are totally fictitious timelines that are made up by humans who don't actually know. So we just say, oh, it's going to be done by May 31st. And like,
Yeah.
that's the idea. So for the most part, there's a lot broken or fallible within that process. But I think what you were asking was, are there ways to encourage creativity and innovation? Or are there ways to make it a part of the culture? And I would say the number one way to do that is make sure you're spending enough time with customers.
Okay.
So make it an active part of everyone's, day, week, month, year to spend time with customers in various situations or stages or kind of like problem solving. So sometimes you're with a customer because you're trying to solve an issue. Sometimes you're brainstorming. Sometimes you're selling to them. Sometimes you're getting referral or advocacy from them, what have you. So there's lots of different ways to interact, but the more I can do that, the more I can really get to the root of what are they trying to do? What does their life look like? And help me therefore come up with it. So I always like that. I hope it's not too simplistic for your group of users just to say, hey, you know what? We need to spend time with customers, asking a bunch of questions, being quiet, and really figuring out what's going on in the world.
Yeah, I was gonna say, to circle back or pull in the fear thing, in part of my career, I was a user researcher, did a lot of usability testing, and I always learned, um, you know, you want to pause and allow for silence to happen, because people, even ourselves, want to fill the silence. But if you let your user, your customer fill the silence, it might say something that they weren't sure they were going to say. And that is usually a very juicy nugget. So that's like the fear of the conversation dying and you wanting to fill it with noise. Pause instead. Get comfortable with that fear because you're going to hear something super interesting. They drop a juicy detail. You find out like who's unhappy or whatever other problems they have. You get much better insight into the context in which your product is being used.
Absolutely true. The skill of being able to ask a question and then be quiet will yield remarkable results. It's hard to do it first. Takes some guts and some confidence. But if you do it and you do it well, inevitably the other person will talk first.
I think that this would be a good point as we start to wrap up the show that you can tell us a little bit about Capta as an account management software, because account management is fundamentally like managing the relationship with customers, right?
That's absolutely what it is. And so what Capta is about it's about giving us visibility so that if I'm a post-sales account manager, so I already have the customer, my job is, I essentially have three jobs and only three. We tend to overcomplicate this, but it really simplifies down to three. Keep the customers I've already got, expand the ones that I have when appropriate and when I can, when there's an opportunity, and let people know if things are starting to go sideways.
Mm-hmm.
Like no surprises, no nasty surprises. That's essentially it. Now, as account managers, we tend to then create all this other work for ourselves. Oh, I got to check in with the client and I got to go do this thing and I got to do a referral call and I have to send this email and this report and do a quarterly business review or whatever it is. Like I create all this other work for me to do. But at the end of the day, it's just those three jobs.
Yeah.
Keep your customer and grow them if you can. And a lot of the skills come down to managing relationships, managing expectations, making sure that the contract, right, between us that was agreed in the sales process gets delivered on. But then even more important, the way that it evolves also then gets delivered on too. Because what always happens is customer buys for one reason, and then you're like, great, we're ready to deploy the service or the solution or the product. And you start doing that, and the customer says, oh, well, I only told your salesperson like this much of the story. There's a lot more to it. And you start to realize what's really going on and what their needs actually are. So this comes back to something we were talking about earlier, which is curiosity and being willing to go talk to the customer and say, what's happening in your world? What's really going on? And just like we were just saying, if I don't accept the service level answer, but instead I stay quiet or I keep asking better discovery questions, that's when I'm going to get to really big potential opportunities.
Yeah.
And see risks. And so CAPTA really helps people to give them a guide and a roadmap for how to do that well.
That's awesome. There are so many little things that I could respond to, but per our conversation before we started, I don't want to let the conversation go on too long and too many tangents. I think we had a great talk about conscious entrepreneurship, and thanks for listening to Make Sense with me, your host, Lindsay Tabas, and my guest, Alex Raymond. We hope you enjoyed our talk on conscious leadership, conscious entrepreneurship, how to identify your fear-based thinking, and how to bring more creativity into your innovation and process. Alex, where can people find you online?
I'm very active on LinkedIn, so I'm easy to find. And the website for Conscious Entrepreneur is consciousentrepreneur.us, which obviously is hard to spell. So just type in Conscious Entrepreneur and you will find us.
Okay. As always, you can check out all the links and resources in the show notes. As a reminder, the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit, which is coming up June 4th in Boulder, Colorado. So based on when we publish this, you have a few weeks to sign up. Hopefully there are seats for you. Final note, if you want to continue to be the smartest person in the room, make sure you're getting notified when each episode hits. And on YouTube, hit that subscribe for next week's episode. And for audio only, follow wherever you get your podcast. Thank you, Alex, for joining me.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for having me, Lindsay. It was a pleasure.
It's not.
Okay.